Bring in show music, please.
This is Squawk Pod from CNBC. On today's episode, two companies are in the spotlight. The first, Nvidia. CEO Jensen Huang is in Beijing just as the U.S. government is eyeing the company's supply of chips to AI competitors in Asia. We take a look at just how thin the line is between competition and national security.
We went to the mat when Russia launched Sputnik to make sure we got to the moon. Where'd that get us? I mean, this really matters.
And the second company in focus, UnitedHealth. A bleak forecast and a sharp sell-off there.
I mean, if it moves 5%, that's usually a big day,
that's big.
Let alone 10.
Then, harsh words for Fed Chair Jay Powell from who else? President Trump. And finally, an investor playbook that's less about play and more about the bench. Aperture Chairman and CEO Peter Krause joins us.
Markets don't react well to chaotic processes.
I'm CNBC producer Cameron Costa. It's Thursday, April 17th, 2025, and Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Andrew by in 3, 2, 1. Cue Andrew.
Good morning and welcome back to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We're live at the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Andrew Sorkin with Joe Kernen and Kelly Evans. Becky is off today, but thank you for all week. I know it's 4 long days.
It feels okay today.
It's okay today?
But then you started saying it felt okay earlier. Now
then after I sat
again.
down for hair and makeup, I was like, well, maybe it's nap time again.
UnitedHealth falling this morning after quarterly results. Earnings of $7.20 a share. That's 9 cents below estimates. Revenue $109.6 billion, also below expectations. UNH lowering its earnings guidance for the full year, and that stock off close to 10% this morning.
Yeah, that's 7 times 55. Is that
350? Yeah.
That's why I said when I sat down, we were gaining about half of what we lost yesterday.
It's down almost 10% on the
and then that happened and it wiped out 350 points of Dow.
I mean, if it moves 5%, that's usually a big day.
Yeah, that's big.
Let alone 10. Wow.
You think that they are going to be paying out more? Is that what's happening here?
Is it utilization?
I don't know what you'd call. I doubt it, and I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna say, "Wow, Tim Waltz." Hey, I wake up in the morning, puts me in a good mood if UnitedHealth is down, something like that. I'm not gonna take any. I mean, some people probably would look at that with all this stuff still swirling around, this crazy controversy about Taylor Lorenz and all this stuff on with Sean Hannity last night about Luigi, whatever his name is, Mangione.
She went on the show to talk about it last night?
She did. And she, gave the normal excuse that, I wasn't saying violence is good or that he was a good person. I was just saying that the overall view of how healthcare is with the insurance, system is something that needs to be dealt with, and it causes a lot of anger.
I wonder whether there's more pressure on the company.
I'm sure.
In terms of utilization, in terms of putting bills through. Well, by the way, I think we are all UnitedHealth customers.
We are.
Don't even.
But also,
don't even, right? And there. But that. By the way, we just had a.
What are you saying?
No, because it's true. I deal with the forms all the time. My son.
They don't even exist as a company. If you want to talk to them, you have to go call a third party. You can't get anybody on. This is UMR. It's a part. But it's.
But the place where it is rife too is there's a Medicare Advantage things where they're supposedly going to give you a more holistic approach and find more things, but then the rap is that they're looking for everything, and they find things that are, that you can charge for that you may or may not necessarily have. I don't know.
Is that where the crackdown's really going to happen on the fiscal side or not?
Right.
Just looking through the results here, I mean, that's a big market reaction to they missed, like you said, top and bottom line.
Fed Chair Jay Powell, but they're kind of, getting tired. My take on this is going to be boring for people. Warning of fallout from President Trump's imposition of tariffs on countries across the globe. Powell made those remarks at the Economic Club of Chicago.
The level of tariff increases announced so far is significantly larger than anticipated, and the same is likely to be true of the economic effects, which will include higher inflation and slower growth. Both survey and market-based measures of near-term inflation expectations have moved up significantly, with survey participants pointing to tariffs.
The inflation numbers we've seen have been cool, and this may be coming, so thank you, Chair Powell, for warning us that could be coming. But as you were taking the coal back right after the pandemic, and we were shoveling the coal onto an already hot economy, not crickets from Powell. And then we get 40-year highs in inflation, which really were the second derivative, not just temporary pricing. Not a word from him back then. So now he's warning.
I thought it was Biden's fault.
It is Biden. It was both of them. They enabled.
But that's why now, because of
But not a word from him back then.
But now, because that happened, they're going to be so trigger happy.
That's what I think. It's more that than a Republican Democrat.
Don't you think? It's a we're not going to let this happen again.
I told you you wouldn't like it. I told you wouldn't like it.
But by the way, Waller is saying they shouldn't repeat that mistake. He's come out and maybe again. Right. We all know there's a race for the next.
Now
chair.
we're for free speech. We shouldn't repeat those mistakes. Now we're for this. We shouldn't repeat those mistakes. Everything went for 4 years. Nothing happened. We didn't do anything.
Yeah,
we didn't say anything. The media didn't say anything.
There's all these mistakes, and you think that they shouldn't be repeated. Why are you saying go repeat them now?
Neither side is consistent on what they push. That's the problem. And the hypocrisy.
I don't know if it's this deep, my friend. But maybe.
I think if there was more accountability.
Just never
about
say
the last
that the
time.
hypocrisy applies to my family. That's all I'm going to tell you. It's from Godfather 2.
President Trump now blasting Fed Chairman Jay Powell on Truth Social. The gloves are off. He says that Powell has been, quote, too late and wrong on interest rates, and Powell's termination cannot come fast enough. We have not seen this kind of language from the president directly since he's been in office about Jay Powell. He's made some comments prior to his election, but he is now officially the president of the United States and talking about trying to get rid of Powell. Of course, as you mentioned, Kelly, earlier, Powell is in this role until
next May.
Next May. Mm-hmm. Question is, when does he nominate somebody else?
Right.
There was always this idea, something that Scott Bessent raised.
This is deja vu all over again. He did this repeatedly in the first
2019
Trump presidency.
2019, the president
almost the same thing.
Said lower rates. Yeah. Yep. And then many people said
did
no.
Lower rates.
And then they
said
did.
He was right.
Yeah. They ended up cutting.
And then the question about jawboning.
Mm-hmm.
Jawboning Powell into doing something. I don't know if he's going to.
I think the market worries about the opposite effect, where the jawboning makes Powell want to dig his heels in and maybe not be as inclined, or the Fed less inclined.
But you remember HW, and when you actually look into it, it goes back much further than that. The president's just reaming the.
Look, the very famous example is Volcker going to see Reagan.
Yeah, exactly.
Having said that,
who got shoved against the wall? Was that?
Yes, that's right.
Martin?
Yeah.
But the truth is, what I don't think we've ever seen is the sort of public condemnation of another official that is ostensibly in an independent role.
I mean, it's the Trump administration. People wake up and have this for breakfast.
Right, it was probably behind the scenes. I mean, we know.
I'm saying it's happened behind the scenes. Volcker, going back to Reagan.
Him and Bessent have a weekly breakfast, which Bessent talked about the other day. So I think the market also knows that line of communication is there. It seems open. It seems like an amiable relationship.
I mean, do you think it's amiable?
Between Bessent and the Fed chair, a weekly breakfast?
I think it's it's working, like forced working way.
Yeah, I think
like a hostage state.
Like a hostage situation.
No.
Like there's Mayor Adams and there's President Trump. What do you think that relationship's like?
No, don't just start going off on all.
Is that amiable?
You're bringing up all your hair on fire moments again. We don't need a reprise of all that. Go back to Greenspan.
Right.
HW literally blamed him for losing to Bill Clinton. We would have never seen, I didn't have sex with that. We would have never seen that if Greenspan had lowered rates. The country would be a totally different place right now.
He blamed him for that when? When he was the president?
No, I guess afterwards.
I'm just saying, have you ever seen a president?
But it was really about read my lips, I think.
I'm just suggesting the norms of what was normal is not normal anymore.
Right, but I think by Trump standards, I don't want to say this was restrained, but I don't think it's unexpected.
Didn't you live in Trump 1?
No,
You barely survived, but
we know. I also think if we don't recognize and just identify to what's happening, and pretend it's normal, then it becomes normal.
Oh, God, I don't want to go over the last 4 years again. I just can't do it every day.
And again, is there a market? I mean, that's what I would look to. Is like, are we going to see we saw the sell-off yesterday. I mean, the market's more concerned that Powell's not going to be quick to cut. Watch jobless claims, watch the labor market.
That's kind of why he gets elected, because it's not business as usual in the political, the feckless and spineless politics that we're used to for so long. This guy just like a bull in a china closet, right? The disruption is sort of why he won all 7 swing states and the popular vote.
That's what happened, and we'll see how people feel about things now. I think that there's
that was what we were going to do after the first presidency, and now he's back. Now he's back with a vengeance, even after all those trials and all that lawfare.
Right, and the economy is doing spectacularly as a result of all of it.
We don't know about the economy yet.
Because we can't measure it?
No, because it's only a stock market phenomenon so far.
Okay.
I know you're hoping.
I'm not hoping anything. I'm hoping for the best. I really am.
That's what they always say.
I pray for the best.
Don't they always say that? And then every time there's something bad, it's like, yes.
I think we all do that. Both sides, every side. It's hard.
Both sides isn't.
Okay, let's talk about this other story. And I know that everyone's got thoughts. So here we go. Report saying the IRS now considering...
I have to go to the bathroom. I'll be back.
Considering...
I have to leave the set.
Yeah, here we go. Kelly and I can talk about it. We probably have a lot of...
Kelly will take...
Listen.
I'm actually very curious where everything lands.
Elise, are you back there? Stefanik, can you...
Let's just tell the audience, for those who are just waking up trying to figure out what's going on, let's explain what's going on. So the IRS is now considering revoking Harvard University's tax-exempt status. This follows a post on Truth Social from President Trump on Tuesday, who floated that idea. This after Harvard rejected what it called an unlawful demand from the White House to overhaul its academic programs or lose federal grants. So the Trump administration threatened the university and actually other universities as well with funding cuts over pro-Palestine campus protests and threats to Jewish students that erupted following Hamas's 2023 attack on Israel and Israel's military response. As of now, there's apparently been no formal request yet for the IRS to change Harvard's tax status. But late last night, the White House Deputy Press Secretary said any forthcoming actions by the IRS will be conducted independently of the president, and investigations into any institution's violations of its tax status were initiated prior to the president's Truth Social post. Just for context, it is illegal. It is a criminal penalty, with criminal penalties, for the president or anybody in the administration to direct or indirectly suggest, not just suggest, but effectively create an investigation or go after a company via the IRS. It is illegal. There are laws on the books.
Oh my God! And you don't remember
about this.
You don't remember Obamagate.
I understand your perspective on
every single company that had Patriot in its name got audited by Louise Lasser, whatever her name was. Nothing happened.
I understand.
So we're being consistent again. Now you have a problem with it again.
You've told me.
What if it's not explicitly directed? And to the point about what happens if the IRS.
Do you not think?
Why was it okay
back
then? When it was Democrats doing it, why was it okay back then?
Okay, it's not okay. And my question, it's not okay.
Okay.
We are in agreement. It is not okay.
Okay.
But if you don't look at this in some semblance and say this is what they call lawfare, which I was told during the campaign repeatedly, that this is the Trump campaign, that they were trying to get rid of lawfare.
Right.
And you don't look at what's going on and think this is like lawfare on steroids, I don't know what to say. It is. It's empirical. It's in front of your eyes. You can watch it.
I thought yesterday you walked away from that conversation with Stefanik totally converted, because she seemed to just answer every one of your concerns. I thought you totally were on board with what was happening after yesterday, because she was so effective in countering all of your arguments.
By the way,
a changed man.
I like her. I don't dislike her. By the way, I can have a great conversation with President Trump. I think he's charming, and
I thought you came around yesterday. I thought you were going, geez, I've been wrong.
No. I didn't.
That wasn't what happened. You basically said that at the end.
No, what I've said over and over, especially with the Harvard situation, is
that
the anti-Semitism piece of this on Harvard campus is terrible.
Right.
Violence is terrible. We need to get rid of that. We can't have disruptions of class. People can't feel intimidated. All of those things we need to end. There's no question about that. And if the government wants to work with Harvard and press them on that specific slice of it, they should be. And they should use their leverage in that way. I don't know if they should use the IRS leverage in that way.
Should the IRS itself be able to consider the tax-exempt status?
Well, unless you think that then we're going to have to do this to, you want to do this to every college and university in the country. I mean, I just think what's happened.
Have these issues?
But here's the issue. In this case, what's happened is the government came to Harvard and said, we have this 5-page letter. You've seen the letter. You can go get it online. You can Google it right now. And you can see what the government is effectively requiring of Harvard. It goes far beyond simply the anti-Semitism issue.
But
and
it implies all campus. The programming that it thinks are contributing to the anti-Semitism.
But it gets into a free speech story. That's to me the issue.
Is there free speech? It's all about the government funding piece of this, right? A private institution
can do whatever
can do
they
what
want.
It wants.
It's
only if they
can
accept
say whatever they
federal
want.
funding.
No one's taking away their.
Well,
their
no,
free
the
speech.
IRS now is going to take away their tax status as well.
Right, but that's still not taking away the First Amendment.
It doesn't take away their First Amendment.
Well,
but this is how. But this is
Can
how.
I ask you, with $55 billion
this is how
in
you
the
see the
endowment,
government using the leverage.
why are you crying the blues when they? What do they spend that money on? $55 billion. There are people that say this is a hedge fund that has a college just so it can keep its tax-exempt status. That's all Harvard is. It's like a hedge fund that happens to have a school attached to it.
Well, first of all, that's a terribly disparaging remark because I would suggest that money is somehow.
What do they use it for?
No, is somehow they're profiteering.
But your description
off of this
was
status in some
influence peddling. So, meaning whatever the mission of the enterprise is, whether it's selling influence or if they have a successful trading arm.
When we keep giving all these grants, it just you get inflation. Suddenly, the colleges don't need this money in student loans. Everyone gets those. No one wants to pay them back. That's why we have this horrible inflation.
If you want to have a conversation about whether the government should be providing either student loans or you think the government should be providing grants to universities for science. And by the way, at MIT as well, and all of these universities. If you think that we should be out of that business, and maybe Doge thinks that, I don't know.
They don't have to be.
We can have that conversation. I don't think that's a great idea.
Hire one conservative at Harvard. That's all you got to do.
There was a letter from Ways and Means Chair Smith last year before the election where he says, tax-exempt status is a privilege and not a right. In exchange, organizations must operate for stated exempt purposes. And they outline the same concerns that we've heard from the Trump administration. But meaning this predates, Jan 20. There have been people raising concerns about whether they're using that status for stated purposes or for more nefarious ones that would violate the spirit of their tax-exempt status. So it's not just a Trump thing.
I just think that I'm just suggesting to you.
I don't really
there are organizations that are that have not-for-profit status all over this country. Some of which, by the way, have a conservative bent, and others that may have a liberal bent. There are theater organizations. There are new enterprise organizations. There are all sorts of not-for-profits. And if you want to change not-for-profits across the country, go with God and do it. But to target ones this way, I think goes to this sort of lawfare situation.
Yeah, but when you said this is against a criminal charge, you once told me that the governor, Hochul here, that they were going after a criminal indictment of her on fraud. That was absolutely not true at the time.
They were going after
civil, and it wasn't her. It was her administration writ large. But
all I'm suggesting to you,
this is criminal if the Trump administration says no one did any time when Obama did it.
Nobody did, and maybe they should.
Now
maybe they should.
Okay, and you wish we looked at the laptop, and you wish we said Biden was senile. You didn't.
Cheese will be next.
Coming up on Squawk Pod, a deep dive into deep tech. Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang is in Beijing, and here at home, the administration is putting pressure on the company, attempting to limit its chip sales in Asia, and Congress, for its part, has launched a probe into how important Nvidia chips are to OpenAI competitor DeepSeek. The question is, will it work?
This whole idea that you can get into a protectionist state and somehow prevent everybody from doing
Still
things.
worth trying to slow it down. At least
I'm not saying
AI
we shouldn't
is
slow it
written in
down. The
English.
question is whether this really does slow it down.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to Squawk Pod from CNBC. Today with Joe Kernen, Andrew Ross Sorkin, and Kelly Evans, who's in for Becky Quick.
Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang is saying China is a very important market for his company and that he hopes to continue to cooperate with the country. This is according to China state broadcaster CCTV. He's in China just a day after Nvidia shares plunged nearly 7%. The drop followed news the company will take more than a $5 billion charge related to canceled orders for the H20 chip. Nvidia says the government told it it would now have to get a license to export those chips to China. Additionally, Congress's Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party is now calling for answers from Nvidia about its sales of chips to China and to Southeast Asia. They want more information related to reports that Chinese AI model DeepSeek was developed with tens of thousands of Nvidia chips. Even though the H20 was legal for export to China until last week, under previous Biden administration rules. In a statement, an Nvidia rep said the U.S. government instructs American businesses on what they can sell and where, and the company follows the government's instructions to the letter. The Financial Times reported yesterday that Nvidia was blindsided by the Trump White House's new export controls on its chip sales to China.
I don't know if you remember, Alex Wong from Scale AI was on our broadcast from Davos. This was the week of the DeepSeek thing, and everybody couldn't fathom how DeepSeek had done what he did. And he said on air, he said, you know, they had a lot more, you all think it's so great, but they really actually had a lot more NVIDIA chips than
Like customized.
Like this wasn't made with
but
some
I think
efficient way.
The thought is that they were still the ones that they were allowed to have access to at the
We're
time.
top of the line, but they still, this, and I had some thoughts about this, as I always do. The Trump administration wants to crush China's AI ambitions. Now, what is that worth to us here?
A lot, but
I think it's a legitimate. That's all we need, is China way ahead in the AI. I don't even know what the future would look like.
But that's where TikTok comes in.
It's scary
too.
enough for humans. If China's the leader, then I'm even more scared.
Yeah.
So how much should you pay in pressure on the NASDAQ? How much should we accept to try to crush China? Or not crush, but try to prevent them from being market
leadership.
Leaders. Are you willing to give something? If we could do it, maybe you think we can't do it anyway.
Right. So
I'm sure.
I'm in a different place, which is I think it's an almost impossible task. I think
probably
we can
can't
slow them
stop
down.
them, but
I think we can slow them down. We can put them a year or 2 or 3 or 5 years behind. But the Huawei example is the story. We thought that Huawei was so far behind in terms of what they could do with their chips for their phone, and then what did they do? And this is, look. There's a great phrase. When you're put in a box, you try to figure out how to fix it, and that's what they did. Meaning, the mother of all invention. Mother invention.
Yeah.
And these
great Frank Zappa, amazing.
And by the way, I also think
you don't even know what I'm saying. Go ahead.
You want competition. You do. You ultimately
maybe,
want competition.
But you see what I'm saying about China.
Look, if you could.
China.
I'm just suggesting to you, I think it's a very hard thing to put that genie fully back in the box. And then look at how, because of this, Huawei now has relationships all over the rest of the world, right?
Look at how we galvanize.
And they become the low-cost provider and everything else. So I think if you just totally chop off everybody, you're.
We went to the mat when Russia launched Sputnik to make sure we got to the moon. Where'd that get us? This really matters with AI. I would say.
Right, but as you just said, where did that get us? Where did that get us?
Got us
Another
to the moon
example.
First. Hey, we found some rocks.
Got the flag there.
Found some, no cheese.
It's probably worth trying to do what we can on the margin, slow it down a little. Kristina Partsinevelos is here with all the latest. Good morning.
Good morning, Kelly. Well, the United States is tightening tech restrictions on China, targeting Nvidia in the AI race. Just 2 months after Chinese startup DeepSeek's AI breakthroughs, Washington has responded. The Trump administration now requires special licenses for Nvidia's China-specific H20 chips, while Congress has launched its first investigation into the company. I obtained the letter last night. Most people can find it online. It asked Nvidia for a list of customers who've made over 499 AI chip purchases from countries like China and Malaysia. They want all correspondence between Nvidia as well as DeepSeek, which was built on Nvidia chips. The New York Times reports DeepSeek may have stronger ties to China's military than previously thought. And then in Nvidia's defense, late yesterday afternoon, they said, quote, "The United States government instructs American businesses on what they can sell and where. We follow those directions to the letter." They also stressed, this is Nvidia, that reported Singapore revenue wasn't shipping to China, addressing fears that Singapore serves as a backdoor. The impact, though, is substantial. Nvidia faces a $5.5 billion quarterly charge. AMD is taking an $800 million hit, with others preparing for similar effects. The latest is Intel being listed at that, possibly having a charge today. I reached out, but didn't get comment in time. And then without exemptions, though, this move would cut off vital computing power for Chinese firms, likely boosting demand for local alternatives like Huawei. So one analyst called it a shot in the arm for China's domestic market.
But did they, I mean, the Singapore numbers do look large relative to
$17 billion of fiscal 2025 revenue, which is 13%.
And people are asking now, even with the tariffs and the restrictions they're trying, can't they just kind of move the chips, they being whoever would want to smuggle them into China, move them through other countries? But
Malaysia would be a great example.
Yeah, but the newest, best of the line chips are quite large, right? I mean, we're not talking about little wafers.
They're positioned into racks.
Okay.
So not the chips are actually very tiny, but the actual rack for a Blackwell is quite large.
Got it.
Very, very heavy.
Right.
But they're still smuggling in the chips. The argument is then, why are you just targeting the particular chips? Then you should go after all of the parts too, so that China cannot move forward and build said supercomputers to maybe, power their military.
What do we know about Jensen Huang being in China and this effort? I mean, it comes right on the heels of these new
the
export
optics
restrictions.
look bad.
He goes there immediately.
Yeah. Well, it's from state media, and he was meeting with trade representatives of the Ministry of Commerce in China. Nvidia's not commenting, or declined to comment, I should say, but we could take state media, I guess, there's photos too.
I just don't know how much we can really set the whole plan back.
At this point, right? Especially with the Huawei's progress in their chips too, and this H20 chip.
Are they equal, Huawei chips?
No, the H20 is actually lower than the Huawei chip, so they've already progressed. And so if you block this lower chip, it's just going to hand more into Huawei's hands.
Mother of invention problem.
Necessity.
And this is why this whole idea that you can get into a protectionist state and somehow prevent everybody from doing
Still
things.
worth trying to slow it down. At least
I'm not saying we shouldn't slow it down. The question is whether this really does slow it down.
Right. Kristina, thanks.
Thanks.
Kristina Partsinevelos.
Next on Squawk Pod, market uncertainty is just another day. Chairman and CEO of Aperture Investors, Peter Krause, is advising patience.
I feel like people shouldn't sell their equities, they shouldn't sell their bonds, they should just sort of sit.
The former chairman and CEO of AllianceBernstein joins us next. This is Squawk Pod.
You're watching Squawk Box on CNBC. I'm Andrew Ross Sorkin, along with Joe Kernen and Kelly Evans, who's been hanging out all week with us. Becky's been off, and we're going to see her next week. But we've got a whole bunch of big stories to tell you about this morning.
Let's get to the markets now with Peter Krause, Chairman and CEO of Aperture Investors. Last time we were on, you were actually pretty sanguine. Have you totally flipped at this point because of the last 100 days?
No, actually, I feel like people shouldn't sell their equities, they shouldn't sell their bonds, they should just sort of sit. Would I put more cash in the market today? Either one? Probably not. I think I'd wait to see a little clarity. But I think we're in a very volatile time period, and obviously the administration's policies are, in some cases, unexpected, and it's making the markets move in unexpected ways. So I think investors have to basically sit with what they have. We as investors are carefully looking at what we own, and we might be selling things and buying things to actually improve positions. But, net, I think it's very tough to call right now.
Okay. The volatility or the nature of Donald Trump and President Trump in terms of some of his decisions and the way things happen, and he says, whatever he's thinking, he says, obviously, on Truth Social or wherever. Yet, some people you probably respect are either on board with some of this stuff, or they like being secretary of whatever it is they're secretary of. But some of these guys are pretty smart and you respect, and they at least on face value think we need, maybe we're negotiating, but they think we need to reset the global trade and shrink the government and all these things that are causing so much tumult. Do you think there's a positive outcome that's possible?
Absolutely, there's a positive outcome that's possible. Let's separate, we want to rebalance trade from how we do it. I don't think there's a lot of argument that we needed to rebalance trade. There's probably a lot of argument on how you get it done. And I don't think there's any argument on we want to cut government expense. Democratic presidents have done that in large size. The question is, how do we do it? And markets don't react well to chaotic processes.
Could we be higher in 6 months? New highs in the markets in a year?
Sure, in a year, yeah, we could.
And could we have a better?
We could also be lower.
I know, but
I think that's the point. You know, you asked me what would I do today. I think the point is that it's tough to see. You know, normally you would say, gee, I have a probability of going up and a probability of going down, and I feel asymmetric about one of them. Today, I think people are saying, I'm not really sure.
Do you think China is being isolated and will feel the heat, or do you think that they're positioned? I mean, Xi doesn't really care what happens, I don't think, to his people as much as we do over here. He could have a stronger hand, theoretically. If this is still a major looming problem in a year, can we be higher at the markets? Or do we need China and the United States to actually come to some type of agreement?
I think it's a mistake for us, meaning the Americans or the United States, to not view the world as being a place where if everybody does better, we do better. Mm-hmm. For 80 years, everybody did better, and we did a lot better. Well, they actually
did better.
They did.
I mean, we did better than anyone else, but they did. Okay. There were times that we were the big dog, and they took advantage.
I don't think there's any real logic to saying we should do more better or a greater amount better. I think the whole idea is if the world is better, we are better, and that has been true for 80 years.
So what needed to be reset then, trade-wise?
Well, there definitely are trade imbalances, and not trade deficits and surpluses. That's a poor measurement, and I think that's reasonably well articulated.
Like Japan should be. We should be. I mean, it's what they import a fifth or a sixth of what.
We have to include services in the calculation.
So you just use it for Japan.
Look at goods. At the end of the day, the only thing you look at is what you manufacture, as opposed to what we sell in services. You know, we are the largest exporter of services in the world, in the most sophisticated ways. We've built a juggernaut on that point. We're not even measuring it. We're just assuming that the only thing that matters is goods, is physical goods. And that's not a reality. That's not a real reality in any case.
Do you think, I asked you off camera, you think the Fed is too tight? And you said yes, because of the uncertainty, or because of, I am like, think about that. Gasoline prices are down 16%. Isn't it possible we offset the tariffs with the weakness in the economy?
The Fed has been clear, whether the market likes it or not, the Fed has been clear that they're going to get inflation to go down. And as long as the labor market is reasonably sanguine, which it is, they're going to be focused on inflation, and I think they should be.
But you think they're too tight?
The Fed was lowering rates before we started the trade discussion.
Right.
And I think the Fed would have continued to lower rates. But the tariff discussion, whatever you want to call it, has put pressure on prices. And the Fed is going to be a policeman on price.
Well, so let me ask you about that. If Jay Powell gets fired, or there's an attempt to oust him or eliminate him, remove him, what does the bond market do?
I don't think it's a particularly good policy to fire someone to change policy.
Okay, but let me ask you a different question.
I think the market will look at it that way and say, he had a policy, someone else didn't like it, they fired him to change the policy. I think the market will be very unhappy about that.
Okay, let me make it more complicated for you.
Sure.
He's out of the job next May anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say sometime in the fall of this year, you start hearing names of people that Trump says he wants to put in place who have a lower, a policy ambition to effectively lower interest rates, and that's what they're going to do. And I imagine whoever that person is going to appear to be seen as, if not
dovish,
a puppet of the president, but someone who's dovish, who's in line with the president of the White House.
Yeah.
Does the market look favorably upon that?
It will depend, Andrew, on where longer-term inflation expectations are. I think if we're in exactly the situation we're in today, I actually think that could be challenging. I think if longer-term inflation expectations moderate, let's just say, for example, the tariffs actually continue to slow economic activity. Let's say the tariffs create a recession. Prices are going to come down, and inflation expectations are going to come down. And if somebody then comes in with that attitude, I think the market will be happy about that.
Right.
I think if inflation expectations continue to rise and prices continue to rise, then some people are going to say, great, we're going to have interest rates down, that's going to grow the economy faster. But the long end of the bond market is going to say, I don't like that. And the government's going to be borrowing money at not 50 basis points wider, but 150 basis points wider.
Right.
And that's going to squeeze out the federal deficit. It's going to make the deficit go up. That's a whole process that you have to think about here. You can't just look at the short end of the curve.
Right.
Well, for me, you're not headed for the hills and selling everything. That's going to be what I take away from this. So you're not that worried.
No, for sure.
Okay.
And look, I think that there were trade imbalances. I think that they should be addressed. I think it's a process question. And I'm not the only person that said that.
But we would have never done it, ever, probably. Well, just like we never did anything else.
The argument
you're happy about the border, at least?
The argument is
Dems. I mean, are you happy about the border?
If I didn't pound my fist, make a mess, and get everybody upset, I couldn't get it to change. That's a false narrative.
Okay. All right. Well, we couldn't close the border.
We don't know the other side.
We couldn't close the border either until we passed that bipartisan bill.
We don't know the other side, Joe.
It's totally closed.
We don't know the other side of that. But if we did have the other side, you can't categorically say that wouldn't work.
All right. I mean Doge, too. And if Doge really would work, that would be great. I'm just not even sure it's working.
You know the story of the Clinton administration. They cut $1 billion out of the government.
The Newt Gingrich-led Congress administration.
Let's call it a Republican-led expense reduction. It's fine with me. But he cut $1 billion out of a smaller deficit, and there was no muss, no fuss.
Right. Don't you think he also, reformed welfare? Don't you think we need to start calling him a Republican at this point? I mean, he's not. I mean, in hindsight,
Clinton.
Bill Clinton. I mean, factually, was he not a Republican?
Well, the last time I talked to him, which was maybe a couple months ago, I don't think
but you weren't supporting him at the time. So what are we talking about?
No, I wasn't.
Okay, well, there you go.
For Bob Dole, just a man. He was a Republican with his peccadillos. He was a Republican. Come on. No, I'm kidding. Peter, thank you.
I'm surprised you're not out there giving money to the foundation. Right?
She's not going to be
Kelly,
president.
you didn't jump into this.
I'm just enjoying it.
She's not going to be president. Why should I contribute to that? That was only a good idea when she was going to be president. When everyone, probably Krauss,
I would have
contributed.
thought, given his Republican status, you would have been a great supporter.
Yeah. Peter, thank you.
You're welcome, guys.
Dapper man.
In the meantime, a quick thank you to Kelly Evans for hanging out all week.
All
4 days.
4 days.
Yeah.
We will see you on Monday. So have a great day off tomorrow.
You heard him, we're off tomorrow. It's a market holiday. But if you're working and you need a little Squawk Pod boost for your commute or your lunch break, just scroll down in your feed on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. There's plenty to choose from. Plenty of episodes with big guests and big discussions. Our TV show Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin, weekday mornings starting at 6 a.m. and going all the way until 9. As always, you can catch the highlights of that show right here on Squawk Pod as long as you follow us wherever you're listening now. We'll meet you right back here on Monday. Enjoy your weekend.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.